The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Are the Nationals hiring the next Theo Epstein? They certainly hope so. We'll talk about that. Terry McLaurin, there's the on-the-record statements about his condition and the speculation about his condition. On the record, not so bad. Speculation, not so good. We'll deal with that coming up. Plus, Danny Hurley's got a new book out. And wait till you hear what he says to Dan Patrick about how he deals with things mentally. It is... you want to hop on the psychiatrist's couch, go listen to Danny Hurley, and we'll do that in the next hour. Wow. Some really, I think, shocking stuff. Lots to talk about today. In the rain. Miguel Indurain. No, just in the rain. Rain in Spain falls mainly on the plane. All right, enough of that. What to make of Terry McLaurin? Okay. He went to see a specialist yesterday for a second opinion on a quad injury. Quad injury, from what I'm told, generally not that serious. Doesn't seem like a second opinion is necessary on that. I saw some speculation that he may be seeing someone who specializes in internal injuries, and if this turns out to be a sports hernia, that he could be out for 3 months. 3 months. Now, it's just so hard to tell with football players because if you watch the replay of McLaurin catching what may or may not have been a touchdown, they ruled he was down at the 1 yard line, but it was a 59-yard catch, and he popped up, he celebrated, and didn't look like there was anything wrong. He got over to the bench, and trainers were checking with him, and he sat out the rest of the game, which was no big deal because that play pretty much put the game out of reach at that point anyway. But, if this is 3 months, that's not good. That's not good. And Terry McLaurin, in his off-season sessions with the media, including the 1-hour session that he had at Eastern Motors in July, made it a big point to say, hey, I have not had an injury in 5 years. Haven't missed a game in 5 years. And they want to say, well, you're turning 30 years old, and that's a negative. Well, I'm different because I didn't play that much in my first couple of years at Ohio State. And there's not as much mileage on my body as other wide receivers. But I think, I think he's subject to this because he did not participate in a single practice in training camp that, you could say that he's not in full football shape. You can talk about going to yoga classes and how he always keeps himself in shape, and I'm sure he does. But there's a big difference between football shape and real shape, and you just keep your fingers crossed and hope maybe it's not serious, and there is some chance that he gets on the field this week. But even if he doesn't, it's only going to be a week or two injury, not 3 months, which would be an issue. This was Dan Quinn yesterday addressing both the Terry situation, and McLaurin was not even at practice yesterday, seeing that specialist, and Jayden Daniels, who did practice yesterday but was limited.
It's pretty normal that when you have something that a second opinion takes place, that's not uncommon at all. Honestly, it's just the opposite. It's really common. Almost everybody does that in some spaces. So as we get into, I'll have a better answer, as I get closer to or as I get into Friday, and then we'll have a sense for, okay, where does it look like for Sunday?
And then with Jayden, what is it, that you've been able to watch him do so far? Is he able, you talked about the cutting and the pivoting, have you been able to watch him do any of those kind of activities?
I have, and like I said, he's worked really hard on that space, and so we'll lean in on the medical side too, John, just to make sure they'll, be the ones to fully clear, but he's working really hard to hit all the stuff that he needs to hit.
So Quinn will not talk to the media today. We're not going to find out anything about injuries. This is, I'm sure Cliff Kingsbury will be asked about both the McLaurin and the Daniels situation, but there'll be limited things that he can say. And then Joe Witt, the defensive coordinator, also speaks today. So it could be Friday where we get hit with something that nobody wants to hear, that Terry McLaurin is going to miss extended time. As for Jayden, as for his situation, if you watch this, and it's about 4 minutes if you want to watch it on YouTube, his entire news conference yesterday, he was holding his tongue. It's not RG3. Okay, people don't get worked up about it like this, but he's clearly not happy about the fact that he didn't play last week. He's not going to throw anybody under the bus. He's not going to complain about that, but he's antsy. He wants to be out on the field. That's really clear. And this is the first question he got about what Marcus Mariota did on Sunday.
Super happy for him. He deserves everything, and he's been my biggest supporter. So it was my turn last week to be his.
This is kind of taking a step back, but did you know that you had been hurt in the Green Bay game? How did you feel? What gave you the confidence to continue and finish out the game?
I didn't know. I mean, I'm a football player at the end of the day. You know, you might take some shots here and there, and it wasn't stopping me from going out there and finishing the game, so I finished the game.
And then what was your reaction when Coach Quinn told you that you weren't going to be out there on Sunday?
I'll leave that between me and him. It wasn't like the most like, okay, yeah, I'm going to sit out.
Yeah, he put up a fight. And Quinn indicated that last week. He said, I love that fire in him. I like that about him. But, you know, sometimes you have to protect the guy from himself. And for the team, it obviously worked out with the way they beat the Raiders with Marcus Mariota. Now, this was the only other soundbite, really, anything worthy from the 4 minutes from yesterday from Jayden Daniels. He couldn't wait to get out of there. He didn't want to be in a situation where he might spill out something he didn't want to spill out. But this was about the possibility that he's not going to have Terry McLaurin with him on the field for the first time in his career in Atlanta on Sunday.
He's Terry. He does what he does. He makes big plays, but, you know, we kind of was dealing with that throughout training camp. So we very much have the next man up mentality. We're confident in other people to make plays.
Jayden, how much running and cutting have you been able to do so far?
Enough to feel good if I play on Sunday.
Okay. He said he's leaving it up to the doctors and the coaches on that. But, again, he's indicating there he's healthy enough to play, ready to play. Reports from the people who watched practice yesterday was that he did do some cutting out there. Didn't practice fully, but was in practice. And I think another indication that he might start on Sunday is the fact that he did a news conference yesterday. If you remember last Wednesday, it was Marcus Mariota talking to the media. Daniels did not talk at all. And usually that's the case. The starting quarterback talk. Doesn't mean he's necessarily going to start on Sunday, but that might be another indication that he's going to be ready to go. As for this next man up thing, that's an old football cliche, but obviously Dan Quinn embraces it.
The way that we go about it is everybody gets reps at practice to make sure they're pushing it to see where we go. We're evaluating, pushing the skills. So if we can continue to get better, when that moment comes and the opportunity is called upon, man, you're ready to deliver. So the competition helps that. We do some at each practice, just non-carded, non-scripted, offense versus defense, going to play, and that keeps a player sharp. You know they got to react. They got to make the plays and make the calls. But having all 70 in our mindset, that's a big part of who we are and how we do it, knowing there's going to be adversity. I think early on in my career, coach, you want this to happen, then this to happen, this to happen. Then you learn later, man, like sometimes that plan isn't there. This is how you have to go win the game, and that could be due to injury, them playing a different way. And so if you think in those ways, man, like be able to adjust, and when that time comes, you go let it rip, and you have to have confidence in the people to do that, and we do.
And look, I don't know how the other teams practice, and I don't know how much the backups get to practice, but that's different from what I've heard for most teams. You have a limited number of reps in practice, and you have to give the first teamers as many as you can. But what Quinn is indicating is he's giving the backups reps, and if they're called upon to come in, that he expects them to be ready to go. Look, they haven't had a big rash of injuries until this year. Well, it's only the second year, but that was one of the keys, I thought, last year to getting to the NFC Championship game. They remained relatively healthy. And now things are starting to add up to the point where you may not have your number one receiver and you may not have your quarterback, your starting quarterback. You've got a number of injuries on defense. They had to sign another corner the other day, and things are starting to add up. Now, how they navigate their way through this is going to be interesting to watch. But they've got a game that they can win, I think, with backups on Sunday. But, how many more games can they win over the course of the season, especially if Terry McLaurin's going to be out for an extended period of time? The Giants have made a change, and there was a lot of talk about Jackson Dart going into the season, that he might be the starting quarterback for the Giants, but they went with Russell Wilson. He's 0-3. He did put points up, but one of the things they talked about in the Sunday night game against Kansas City was he was throwing the ball away at the end of the game when their only chance to win was to either get pass interference or complete a pass. And it's probably over for Russell Wilson. Maybe some team will try and bring him in next year to compete for a starting job, but it looks like the Jackson Dart era has begun in New York, and he is going to be the starter on Sunday when they play the 3-0 Chargers, and they are a very good defensive team. And so when Booger McFarland from ESPN analyzes both college and pro, does a lot of college football studio work on the weekends, he was asked about Dart starting this game against a very good Chargers team with a very good defense, or would it have been better to wait a week and play the lowly New Orleans Saints? Here's what Booger said.
It amazes me. Like, why does everybody always try to be concerned and try to pick the place that he starts at, DP? Like, he's a professional football player. Take the Band-Aid off. Like, this is not Ole Miss. This is not Syracuse. Like, we're not playing for the Peach Bowl. We're playing for the Super Bowl. Take the Band-Aid off. Let him go play. And if he fails, great. Turn the tape on, coach him up, and send him back out there. Like, at a certain point, we have to stop trying to handpick a moment for success. We almost treat these guys like our kids. I want my child to be successful. So you try to put them in a spot where they can have success early so they can get confidence. I get that. But at a certain point, don't you want your kid to kind of fall and kind of scratch themselves up a little bit? Like, I don't want them to bust the head of them, but I do want them to fall so they can kind of grow and learn. I think you have to treat the quarterback the same way. Is he going to struggle against San Diego or Los Angeles? Absolutely. He might get his head beat in, but he'll be better for it the next day. He may struggle against the Saints. He'll be better for it the next day. The only way you can teach a guy or a player can learn something, I truly believe you learn more through failure than you do through success. So I want him to fail soon. So shame on you for trying to handpick where you put him at, DP. Put him out there. Let him play.
Hey, I learned more. People say, how do you know, like, what do you buy in on a quarterback? I said, I want to see what he does when he throws an interception, what he does the next series. That will tell me everything. I want to know what you do when it's all starting to cave in. And, yes, get him out there, let him play. I think they're viewing him as a savior with the Giants. And if you're Brian Daboll, he has to be a savior to save your job, it feels like. What do you have to see if you're ownership of the Giants with Jackson Dart that you're going to bring back that coaching staff?
I think if you see the quarterback fail and then continually get better throughout the season, because I think we all feel like a rookie quarterback is going to struggle. But what you want to see is progress. You want to see him. He may not be Jayden Daniels because he's not, but if you can have some moments of success the way Jayden Daniels did as a rookie, and toward the end of the year, then you can say, okay, I think the coach can get it out of him, and now I'll bring the coach back. But because I think at some point, and the Giants have been very patient, because at some point you got to stop the cycle. You got to stop the cycle of coach on the hot seat, rookie quarterback, play rookie quarterback, coach get fired, then you start over. Because now rookie quarterback has wasted year one, and now year two is a learning year, and then you're in the year three, and guess what? At a certain point, he's going to want to be paid. It's kind of the same thing that's going on in Chicago. Like, everybody's talking about, like, Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams came in. Now Ben Johnson is there. I think those two guys are married for like 4 or 5 years. I think that's the way to do it. Like, you have to marry the coach and the quarterback so he can have time to actually coach the player. And so if you're Giants ownership, if Brian Daboll shows that Jackson Dart has any type of pulse throughout the season, I think you bring him back. I think you bring him and Joe Shane back maybe on a 2-year deal. And if they can't get it done at that point, then you make a change. By then, at that point, I think the quarterback will have enough experience where you can figure out whether or not you want to keep him or you want to give the new coach an opportunity to go draft his own quarterback.
That's Booger McFarland yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. Jackson Dart is an experienced rookie, and he's played a long time in college, I believe 5 years of college football. So he may be ready to hit the ground running. And as you hear from many of these analysts, the pro game is a lot more similar to the college game than it's ever been before. So he may have initial success. But I was thinking about Heath Schuler. Now, this is going back over 30 years. And he wasn't like Jackson Dart, middle of the first round pick. He was the third pick of the draft in 1994 by the Redskins. He had been runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. He had been a 3-year starter at Tennessee, and they hoped he would become the quarterback of the future. Instead, he became one of the biggest quarterback busts of all time. But they started the season with John Freese, journeyman guy. He started the first 5 games of the season. In the 5th game, which they lost to Atlanta at home, they finally gave Heath Schuler a chance to get on the field, get his feet wet. Heath Schuler's first start, a lot tougher than it would have been, will be for Jackson Dart, I believe. He was facing the 2-time defending champion Dallas Cowboys. And the game was at RFK, but Dallas was a much better football team, as the 34-7 final indicated. His stats, not as bad as you might think, although not great. He was 11 of 30, only 96 yards. He did throw a touchdown, but was intercepted and sacked twice. Norv Turner, who knew a lot about quarterbacking, if you ask Troy Aikman, he says he owes his career to Norv. He threw Heath Schuler out there, and he wanted Heath Schuler. Remember that. Charlie Cashley did the picking, but Turner was the coach, and he wanted Schuler at number 3. And he held out, which put him behind for sure. It turned out he wasn't very smart, and he wasn't very good, and they lost to Dallas. His second start was at Philadelphia. That was a close game. Threw a couple of touchdowns. They lost 21-19. Okay, maybe this kid is growing. Then he gets his third start, and it's at home against Arizona, and he was putrid. This was a game they only lost 19-16, but he threw 5 interceptions. 5 interceptions, again, less than 200 yards passing, 11 of 32 for 158 yards. They benched Heath Schuler for the following game at Indianapolis, and Indianapolis had a good team. They had Marshall Faulk at quarterback, at running back. Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback of that team, and Gus Frerotte, a 7th-round pick, got his first action, started, NFC Player of the Week, 7 of 32, 226 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 41-27 victory, one of only 3 wins that the Redskins had that year. So I don't know if Jackson Dart is going to mirror this, but I found it interesting that they are putting him up against a team that is really good, a really good team, especially defensively, in the Chargers. And much like Norv Turner said, well, the hell with it. He's going to have to go against the fire at some point. We're going to throw him in against the 2-time defending champs and see what happens. And he was bad, but not as bad as you might think, though the final score, 34-7, indicated it was not a competitive football game. All right, coming up, the Nats are on their way to hiring a very young and perhaps a very good general manager. We'll take a look at the move that's being reported by Jeff Passan and others as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Le Dunk de Mort, Dunk of Death, took place 25 years ago today. Vince Carter at 6'6", jumping completely over 7'2" Frederick Weiss in the Olympics as the U.S. beat France for the gold medal. It was 25 years ago today. Frederick Weiss, who had been the 15th overall pick by the New York Knicks, never played a minute in the NBA, and I believe some of that has to be related to the fact that Vince Carter truly posterized him, and he posterized him 25 years ago today. We'll look back on that later in the show. It's being reported that the Nationals are close to hiring a new general manager. Now, it's unclear exactly what title he's going to have. It's Paul Toboni, who is only 35 years old. He's the assistant general manager of the Red Sox. And he's been there, though, 11 years, so worked his way up through the organization, and I believe could have gotten the title of GM. You're going to hear Mark Zuckerman and Al Galdi talk about that in just a minute. But the interesting thing about what this job may be is that they've really cleared the decks for him. Mike DeBartolo has been the interim GM. They actually let him handle the draft. And as Tom Libero reported a couple of weeks ago, that ownership had gone to Mike Rizzo and said, we want you to fire Davey Martinez as manager. He didn't want to do it, so they fired both of them. They let DeBartolo do the draft. I'm sure the work had already been done up to that point, so it wasn't a major shift there. But looks like he's not going to stay. They've also cleared the decks in that former scouting director Danny Haas resigned, joined the Orioles earlier this month, and Brad Ciolik, who was the senior director of amateur scouting, has joined the Detroit Tigers. So Toboni is going to be the man here, it appears, and will presumably hire his own staff. He's not inheriting people. And he's, part of the new wave of how baseball works, though he was a player. He played at Cal. He has been a scout in the past before, but, nowadays you got to be an analytics guy. Is he Theo Epstein? We're going to find out. But there's more to it than that with this organization, as Mark Zuckerman and Al Galdi discussed on their Nats Chat podcast.
What's most important here is he is going to be the guy, whether he's GM, president of baseball operations, combination of the two, or some other title they come up with. He's going to be the guy in charge of the whole department. And you mentioned that his name hadn't really come up. It had come up as a candidate, but it was kind of shot down, or he was sort of shot down as one of the legitimate contenders for it a week or two ago, I want to say, because it sounds like Boston, with Craig Breslow as their chief baseball officer, was going to be naming somebody as their GM, the number 2 in command GM, and that Toboni was a top candidate for that. And the thought was that he may want that job instead. So I think that ties in interestingly enough here. Once we know what is the title in DC, does that explain why he didn't want to be number 2 in Boston, even with a GM title, as opposed to being number 1 in DC, depending on what his title is? Maybe more control, obviously, as the guy making the call. So I think that's one of the most important things still to find out about it. As you said in that passing report, an up-and-coming guy, well-regarded throughout the sport, 35 years old. And I think what's also interesting is he's got both a scouting and an analytics background. MBA from Notre Dame. Okay, that's the new age kind of GM. But he played baseball at Cal Berkeley and worked his way up over the course of a decade with the Red Sox through their scouting and player development. Originally an intern, then an area scout, then a VP of scouting, then the last couple of years as vice president and assistant GM. And he ran their draft room for 3 years. In the last couple of years in his most recent job, had more oversight over the whole organization. So it's not necessarily one of those, it's not either or. It's not, well, this guy's just got the scouting background or he's the new wave analytics. It does seem like he comes from both sides of the equation, which would, to me, be a pretty appealing thing to have. And then the final point being somebody who comes spending for the last decade with a winning organization, not always winning, but they do win a lot in Boston. They've won a World Series during his time there, and a pretty good track record for scouting and player development, which we know has got to be a priority around here. So if they were going to go outside, I think a lot of people should be encouraged by the idea of getting somebody who has worked for a good organization, a big market organization that operates things a certain way. And now, what is he able to do? What is he allowed to do? How will he do running his own franchise in Washington?
Yeah, and that is the biggest question of all. Will the Lerner family, with Paul Toboni running baseball operations, spend more on infrastructure and spend more on players, or are the Nats going to still be run on the cheap? Now, just thinking about this logically, if you are Paul Toboni and you are a bright, rising young executive, presumably making a very good living working for the Boston Red Sox, why would you take the job of running Nationals baseball operations if you don't get assurances from ownership that it is going to spend properly on infrastructure and players? And so, without knowing what Paul Toboni has been told, just thinking about this logically, you would think that he has been given some assurances here that he likes what he has heard when it comes to how ownership is going to be behaving moving forward. Because let's make this clear. It doesn't matter who the Nats hire. They could hire Branch Rickey. If ownership doesn't behave in a different way in terms of spending, and again, it's not just players, it's infrastructure, then there's no hope here, okay? Ownership has got to step up. And if that's going to happen, that is very encouraging. And that a guy like Toboni is taking this job would seem to suggest that he has been given these assurances. And by the way, from Toboni's perspective, and I would think he has an agent, I would make it a point to put in my contract things regarding spending from ownership. And there are ways to do that where it is in your contract that, X amount of dollars are spent on infrastructure, or you get X amount in terms of a budget to spend on staffing, that kind of a thing. I don't know that you can demand from ownership to have like a minimum threshold for a payroll. That's probably extreme. But when it comes to spending on staffing, I think that is something you could get put in your contract in some way. And if I'm Toboni, that's what I'm doing. I think you have to do that, knowing what is out there about this ownership. But that aside, just thinking about this, if you're Toboni, why would you come here if you didn't like what you heard from ownership? And I find that maybe the most encouraging thing of all. If the Nats have reeled in a bright, young, rising executive in a guy like Toboni, who seems to be very well regarded, he must be attracted to this job. And it's not just about, the Washington, D.C. market or what the Nats have. It's also about who he's going to be working for. And so maybe, just maybe, there's some real reason for optimism here.
To piggyback off that, my thought is, here's somebody who at least was a leading candidate, if not even had the option to become the Red Sox GM. Again, not as the number one guy, but as the number two guy. And you would imagine somebody who would be up for other head of baseball operations openings around the league in the coming years, that if he was going to take this one now, it must have been awfully attractive to him.
That is Mark Zuckerman and Al Galdi on Nats Chat podcast with some very good insight into what Paul Toboni would bring here. Let me just throw one other thing into this, that maybe it's unlikely and maybe it doesn't work this way when you hire someone for this position, whether it's director of baseball operations or whether it's general manager or both or however it is. Is it possible that the Lerners are hiring Paul Toboni for something else? I mean, is that in play, that there is something in place to sell the team, and new ownership has been communicating to the Lerners, this is the guy we want. We just need him in place because it's going to take time to finalize the sale and so forth, and we want him to hit the ground running for scouting and so forth and so on. I mean, could that be the case? I don't think that's the case, and I don't know if it actually ever works that way when you hire somebody for a position like this. But if he's going to have say over everything, as both Al and Mark are suggesting there, or he wouldn't have come here, then, have the Lerners done kind of an about face. Now, there was a time they did spend money, okay? They did, and they realized early on that they had to get into the spending business, and that's why they got Jason Worth just to say to the rest of baseball, oh yeah, we are going to spend on free agents. But then after the World Series and after what turned out to be a horrible deal with Steven Strasburg, they've totally reined everything in. They haven't spent bupkis since then. And it's not just on players, as Al is indicating, in infrastructure and in the way that they use their scouting department, analytics, et cetera. That they have not been known as a spendthrift operation. The Lerners have never been known for that in business anyway. So, and any of the big deals that they made were all made with the old man, Ted Lerner, who passed away a few years ago. So keep an eye on those things. Meantime, speaking of ownership, Ted Leonsis, if you missed this last week, he did an interview with CNBC and said that he wanted the Nationals. He made no secret about that. Also said he wanted to buy, I believe, DC United. And he already owns, of course, the Wizards, the Caps, and the Mystics. And he said he wants to have the baseball and the soccer not for ego, but for the fans, because those teams will struggle to compete against the Yankees and Dodgers. But if we can take those teams and plug them into the platform and they can operate with excellence as a team and we can handle all the top line, I think that will make them competitive, and that's what the fans are looking for. The plug-in would mean, as Tom Libero has today in his column, the plug-in would be put the Nationals on his network, the Monumental Network, and maybe even add the Orioles as well, so they have summertime programming, and they have 2 channels, so maybe they can make that happen. Now, Leonsis has reportedly offered, according to the Washington Post, offered $2 billion to buy the team. Remember, the Lerners put them up for sale in 2022, then changed their minds. The owners came up with $2 billion, and then the Lerners said, "No, we're gonna stay. We're not going to sell the team." But there's another interesting angle on this. And after Sunday, after the Nats play their last game against the White Sox, the Massa deal goes away, or can go away. They have the option of leaving. And Tom has an interesting little nugget in here about this, which may be part of what's going to happen with Major League Baseball, what Commissioner Rob Manfred has said he wants to do. Essentially, he wants to turn Major League Baseball broadcasting into what the NFL does, where it's all under network umbrella and it's all distributed by a couple of different networks. Maybe they could make a deal for some games to be on ESPN and some games to be on, many of the games to be on the MLB network, in which they would have regional telecasts of games. Like we would get all Nationals games and Orioles games through the MLB channel, which I'm sure would be on a second tier, an extra pay tier. But what Tom says is, for baseball to work out this deal where they can leave Masson at the end of the year, and I believe that's going to be the end of Masson because I don't think it's going to exist just with the Orioles, but that they would be able to leave Masson would be quid pro quo for becoming a part of this massive baseball network that Manfred wants to create. Now, he's going to get pushback from the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Cubs. Those teams make a lot of money on their regional sports networks. Elsewhere, they've gone bankrupt across the country. I can't imagine Masson's making any money either. So I would think that would go away too, and the Orioles and the Nats would wind up on that. It's probably not going to happen for another year because the current collective bargaining agreement doesn't run out until the end of next season, December of 2026. But I think that's where it's headed, and that I hadn't thought of that, but that seems quite likely that baseball in working out this deal, because everybody, when you make a deal, you want to have something back in return. And Manfred isn't just saying, "Oh yeah, you've been good partners, and you really had to battle all those years with Angelos, and now Angelos is gone. There's new ownership and all this." No, it's a deal. Some deal had to be made. So that might be something to keep an eye on as to where that goes. I talk about Mike Locksley here a lot. I'm a big defender of Locksley here, used to here, not in the last couple of weeks, especially after the way they dominated Wisconsin last Saturday at Wisconsin. But you used to, you got Locks isn't going to get it done. You got to get a real coach in there. Well, what he did and what has resulted is really quite unique among college football teams. And there's a very good column today in USA Today by Matt Hayes, and he points out what Locksley did on July 22nd when they had media day for the Big Ten, that he did something that would be a fireable offense, basically saying that the NIL is not good, and these are things that we talk about, everybody talks about, but he basically is said this, and any coach that says he lost the locker room often doesn't stay. I mean, it's very rare that happened. It happened in this case, but this is what he points to as what could have been a fireable offense for Mike Locksley and what he said on July 22nd.
This, for me, is kind of a year of what I like to call vulnerability. One of the greatest characteristics you can have as a leader is the ability to be vulnerable. And I'll tell you, a year ago, Coach Locks lost his locker room. And for me to stand in front of a group of media and tell you that I lost my locker room, and it wasn't because I wasn't a good coach. It wasn't because they weren't good players, because we were better than a 4-win team. But what we had to do is we had haves and have-nots for the first time in our locker room, and the landscape of college football taught me a valuable lesson. And that valuable lesson is it's important for me, even in the midst of this change, to continue to educate our players on the importance of what playing for something bigger than yourself is all about. And I can tell you that if I've got to put my desk in the locker room this year, I will. And I expect our team to show up, play hard, and probably one of the most exciting things is if you ask me what kind of team we have, I don't know yet. And that's a good thing. And that's a good thing because as a coach, sometimes we feel like we have to have that answer. Well, I've got fall camp. I've got about 25 practices in July and August to figure it out. and feel very confident with the changes and the elevation of our program that we'll put a product on the field that we can all be really excited about.
And so far, he's done exactly that, and he did it with kind of a gimmick, but a gimmick that at least so far has worked.
If you come to Maryland and you look outside of our locker room, there's a sign, and that sign reads, you can leave your Louis belts, your car keys, and your financial statements outside of this locker room, because when you enter those doors, we'll all pay the same price for success or failure.
Now, he did land the most important thing that you can get, and that's a quarterback. But you look across the country at teams playing on Saturday, you always hear, oh, yeah, he's now at this school from having been at this school and this school before that. He's got a true freshman playing quarterback. That's unusual around the country, especially for an undefeated team. And he got Malik Washington from Spalding, local guy, stays home, got the size to be an NFL quarterback, 6'5", 235 pounds, the arm, he could run. Could have gone to Penn State or Oregon and probably would have sat for a little while anyway until they found he was ready to go. But as is pointed out in this column by Matt Hayes in USA Today, before Washington signed last December, Mike Locksley told him how and why the 2024 season unraveled and how Washington could be at the forefront of a significant roster turnover. Here's how significant. 64 of the 85 scholarship players weren't a part of last year's team. 64 of 85. Wow. Guys like freshman defensive ends Zahir Mathis and Sidney Stewart, who have combined for 6.5 sacks in the first month of the season. Those guys, true freshmen. You don't see that very often. Then he's also taken guys who stuck around and rewarded them for that. Senior wideout Shalik Knotts spent 3 years playing different positions, and according to what Matt Hayes here has, he looks like an NFL draft pick with 5 touchdowns in 4 games. With this true freshman throwing him the ball, as Washington became the first true freshman since 2020, only the second in 20 years, to throw for 250 yards plus in each of his first 4 games. Of course, the first 3 were not, Wisconsin caliber teams, but still, first time playing college football, he's completed 60% of his passes, has accounted for 10 touchdowns, 2 of them rushing, and has thrown an interception and has had a fumble, but that's about it. And Locksley says this about this year's team. Last year has no bearing with anything we have going on with this team. We've ripped off the rear view. That could be said for a lot of teams, the way they turn things over, but they do it in many cases like what Bill Belichick is doing in North Carolina with 70 new players, but they're mostly from the transfer portal. What Locksley did was he chased out the guys he didn't want anymore. He kept the guys around who had been paying the price, like a guy who's an actual senior, Shalik Knotts, and then brings in these terrific freshmen like Malik Washington. And what he said back in July, which for in some cases people go, whoa, he lost the locker room? You got to get this guy out of here. But he's lived to tell about it, and now he's got a team that's 4-0 with a bye week coming up. And then they play, I'm really looking forward to this. I mentioned I'm a season ticket holder for Maryland. Yeah, only like 60 times. I'm looking forward to see him play Washington. That's a 3:30 kickoff a week from Saturday in College Park. Coming up here, we'll get to more of what Dan Quinn said yesterday about the injury situation heading into the Atlanta game and some really amazing stuff from Danny Hurley, who's got a book out. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Oh, Danny Hurley, you need a hug, man. 2 national championships, one of the most successful coaches in college basketball now, and an argument can be made with back-to-back titles, one of the best ever. But he sounds tortured. I mean, really tortured. He's got a new book out, which he was promoting yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. And listening to him kind of reminded me of John McEnroe back in the day when he would go at it with chair umpires, get penalized, and then sit and talk with reporters for like half an hour, unloading all of his insecurities and things that he was dealing with. He had greatness in tennis. Hurley's got greatness in college basketball, but they are tortured, or at least McEnroe was. And as I think you'll hear, Danny Hurley is a tortured soul who's been to the top of the mountain twice and was courted by the Lakers, the premier arguably premier coaching job in the NBA, which he turned down. He's still coaching, but doesn't sound like it's a lot of fun. It's really crazy to listen to. All right, we're waiting to find out more about the Terry McLaurin injury, and I don't know if we're going to find that out today. We hear from the coordinators. We don't hear from the coach. I'm sure that Cliff Kingsbury will get a bunch of questions about it, and I'd be very surprised if he has any light to shed on that. And then Joe Witt, the defensive coordinator, will also speak today. So we won't hear from Dan Quinn until tomorrow. Yesterday, kind of vague. He said that no problem, Terry McLaurin going to see someone else for a second opinion on what has been talked about as a quad injury, though he never said quad injury. In fact, let's play this again. I played this at 10 o'clock, but I think it's, these coaches, and Quinn has been around for a long time, what to say and what not to say. So in discussing the Terry situation, you never hear him say quad injury, right?
It's pretty normal that when you have something that a second opinion takes place, that's not uncommon at all. Honestly, it's just the opposite. It's really common. Almost everybody does that in some spaces. So as we get into, I'll have a better answer, as I get closer to, or as I get into Friday, and then we'll have a sense for, okay, where does it look like for Sunday?
And then with Jay.
Yeah, so there's no indication of what the injury exactly is. It's been called a quad injury, but you didn't hear Quinn say that. Now, there's been some speculation in seeing this specialist who deals with mostly internal injuries. Is this a sports hernia? If it is, he could be out as much as 3 months. Yeah. Then you got this report in the last hour or so from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network that it's a hip flexor injury. That would mean he wouldn't play this week, but I don't know how long that would keep him out if he can't go. He has not missed a game in 5 years. He's played every game that Jayden Daniels has played. Daniels may be moving closer to playing. He practiced some yesterday. Wasn't a full participant in practice. They're still listing him as day-to-day. He clearly wants to play and says that he feels good enough to play on Sunday, but that's not his decision. It's up to the coaches. And I would think, I'm just guessing here, they're going to weigh his real desire to play because he had a 4-minute news conference kind of gritting his teeth yesterday. He did smile. He said the right things about Marcus Mariota, and there's a great relationship going on there. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But he's the leader of the football team. He wants to be on the field. He did not like watching the game up in a box. And I think the reason they did that was they were a little concerned about him standing on the sideline. As we saw with Dan Quinn, he got knocked over. What if somebody runs into Jayden Daniels standing on the sidelines and further injures that knee? I think they wanted to play it safe on that. He was non-committal about playing with a brace if he plays. Doesn't sound like he wants to, but he's going to leave that up to the doctor. So that's where they are on those 2-star offensive players. And if I had to bet, I would say for sure that we won't see Terry McLaurin. And I think that if there's any doubt that Jayden Daniels will sit another week. Meantime, speaking of injuries, remember a couple of weeks ago or maybe even before the start of the season when Quinn was questioned about Deebo Samuel returning kicks, that he's so valuable doing so many things on offense, whether he's running the ball or catching the ball or serving as a decoy or whatever he does, would you want to run the risk of putting him out there on kickoff returns? And Quinn said he's so explosive that he can change a game with that, and he felt comfortable enough to do that. And clearly, with the way you've seen them play in these first few games here, they are very intent on emphasizing the importance of special teams, which has been a long tradition in this town, going back to the days when George Allen hired the first special teams coach ever with the Rams, Dick Vermeil, and then when he came to Washington, he hired Marv Levy as his first special teams coach. We all know what Marv Levy went on to do in the NFL as a head coach, and now is exactly 100 years old. His birthday's the same as mine. God bless you, Marv. Anyway, this was Quinn on how he emphasizes special teams and when it became such an important part of what they do.
When the new kickoff rule started, we were right at the front of that to say, can this be an advantage? Can we find a space that we could create that from field position to identity? So I thought it would begin it would begin there on the kickoff and kickoff return side. Then as we got to learn it better, and we were all kind of at the first part, remember there was a lot from OTAs through training camp, so I thought it began then. And then adding, obviously Tress, the way he can punt, putting people down, and the different style of players, like obviously Revo and, is at the front of it, but then it's Ballore and then Percy Butler and others that just started to emerge in this way. And we thought, man, this can be a weapon for us, and we can really push and feature the guys and use them in those ways. But I think it was the kickoff and the decisions to say, we're going to go for it and really try to be at the front of this if we can. And I think that was the start of it.
Where have you gone, Rusty Tillman? The kicking situation, speaking of special teams, still a little nerve-wracking there. They gave guaranteed money to Matt Gay in the offseason, went through 4 different kickers last year. And so they said, we got to get this right. So they brought in Matt Gay, gave him $4.5 million guaranteed, and he was shaky in the preseason. He has missed 3 field goals this year, all of them within 60 yards, and one of them a 37-yarder on Sunday. Those are automatic now in the NFL. If you don't have a kicker who can consistently kick it from 50-plus, you got to be looking for somebody else. He's also had a kickoff that's gone out of bounds. Now, they're still experimenting with the new rules and so forth, and it really makes no sense with the ball coming out to the 35 on touchbacks to kick it out of the end zone. But that was bad. After scoring a touchdown to start the game, they automatically give the Raiders great field position when he kicks it out of bounds, and they take over at the 40. Yet, with those mistakes, Dan Quinn was asked yesterday, are you considering other kickers, and would you bring in other kickers for tryouts? And he said,
yeah, we have a lot of confidence in Matt to go. I was pleased to see, the one at the end of the half. So as we're going through it, we're still digging in to find our spaces to go. But no, we have full belief in that.
This week. Now, if there's a miss or two in Atlanta, you got to believe there's going to be the kicking caravan that's going to come in. But this is, week to week, and this is how kickers live. They go from team to team. They find their stride, and everything's fine until they don't. And then you got to find yourself a new kicker. They don't want to make a move with the guaranteed money, I'm sure. Although, bringing in a kicker now would be fairly cheap, but they're going to ride this out, looks like. And most coaches do it that way until they don't do it anymore. And at some point, they may have to make a change, and Matt Gay has got to get things right. But that was not a good look on the sidelines on Sunday after he missed the 37-yarder, and he's yelling at himself. Kickers have to be able to move on, to turn the page. And let's hope that that happens with Matt Gay. Some more stuff around the NFL. You may have heard by now that Jackson Dart will be the starter for the New York Giants. I would think this is the end of Russell Wilson as a starting quarterback. Injury may force him back in, or poor play may get him back in. But it's been going this way as Wilson. It's not Wilson anymore. This is his 4th team in 4 years. The Broncos got rid of him. He was backup for the first half of the year in Pittsburgh last year, did beat Washington, then winds up with the Giants, but they also drafted Jackson Dart in the first round, and Jackson Dart is going to get his first start on Sunday when they take on the 3-0 Chargers. And, the discussion that always goes on with these debuts is, do you throw him in there against a really good team like the Chargers? Or in this case, do you wait another week and play him against a bad New Orleans team on the road? We heard from Booger McFarland on that in the last hour. He said, the hell with it. This is you're not trying to win the Peach Bowl here. You're trying to win the Super Bowl. You put your best players in there for games that you hope you can win, and it doesn't matter who you're playing, which is the way it was with Steve Young. Now, he did have some pro football experience when he came to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1985. He played in the USFL with the LA Express, but this was his first NFL experience, as he discussed it with Tony and Mike yesterday, and the decision to go with Dart against the Chargers on Sunday.
As a rookie, how would you feel about this being your first test?
Look, if you're worried about it, that's a huge problem. Like, it's the NFL. It's coming at you. You're not, there's no way to get ready for it. There's nothing you do. You better just be excited about it. I remember maybe my second start, we go to Chicago in 1985, and the 85 Bears, Mike, you remember those days? And I walked in, We went out warm up, and we come back in the locker room, and Jimmy Ray's my offensive coordinator. He comes in, he sits next to Steve. Listen, man, I want you to be careful out there tonight. And I'm like, no, I'm not trying not to throw too many picks. You know, he goes, no, I mean, like, you could get killed. Like, like I could die. I could die. And it was close. It was close. But I would love that to someone to go into Jackson Dart and say, hey, bro, you know, be careful out there. You could die. But it's not going to happen. Look, what he needs, Tony, is he needs a running game. Young quarterback, every quarterback does, but young quarterbacks need the running game, so at least they can do play action, turn their back, do the things they thought they could do in college, and they have not run the ball well. Last week, not bad. Cam ran it better, but 28th in the league, and I think this week probably in the mid-20s. I mean, if the Giants are going to support a rookie quarterback, you got to be in the top 10 running team, and that's got to change fast.
Steve, I don't want to have any nightmares or anything, but I watched Sunday's game at Soldier Field with Richard Dent and Otis Wilson. Just to mention that, just throwing that out there so you can hear it.
I remember. I got tattoos of it all, scars.
Those guys are still around. All right, so I'm watching the game, and I'm watching Lamar Jackson the other night, and I was mortified because I keep seeing guys catch him from behind, and I see him in scrums that he often, for years, emerged from at 100 miles an hour. And I have this thought, and please feel free to tell me I'm nuts, that Lamar is losing or has lost some of his otherworldly burst as a guy who had burst. You know something about that? Am I crazy, or is this happening?
It's okay. Look, age has it's undefeated, right? But I'm not saying that's happening. But I'm saying it's okay if it happens. Because the truth is, we are developing Lamar Jackson into one of the most sophisticated passers in the NFL. That will unlock all of the ability that I've said the world's greatest football player. If we can get all the way there, and the Ravens would fully commit, it's getting closer. So he doesn't need to be Barry Sanders anymore. It's awesome if he could. And the other thing I noticed over the years that I played, as time went on, I never lost the ability to make somebody miss. Even when I was last year, 38 years old, I was like, I made people miss. It was fine. Maybe I wasn't quite as fast. And he's never going to lose that ability to do what he needs to do to threaten the line of scrimmage. It won't go away. And if he's lost a quarter of a step, it's fine, because what we're developing is him to be one of the best players that ever played. And we're on our way.
A guy who hopes he's on his way is Caleb Williams, who had a terrific game Sunday, but it was just a bad Cowboy defense as a quarterback. Do you ever concern yourself with whether it's you or them, or is that just something that people are seeing from the outside?
Well, it's kind of 50-50, right? Like when teams suck, it helps. You know what I mean? Like it's not a bad thing, but it's not like college. It's not like you play the Colorado School of Mines, or Humboldt State. Like it's not everybody's just wide open. The pros are paid, they're great athletes, and you play bad defenses, it does help. So that's 50% of it. But I'm going to give coaching and the transition and what Ben's brought and what Caleb's feeling as an early sign of what that other 50% is a close kinship that gets built between coach and quarterback, so that it gets easier for the quarterback. It gets simpler. That's why Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Randy Reed are so famous, and all the coaches that have left them, is because they've made the job of playing quarterback easier. And I think Ben can do that. And it feels like maybe, I don't want to get it too excited, Mike, but it feels like maybe this is the beginning of something really cool.
We will get you out of here on this. And it's about quarterbacks, of course. How does one go from being bad against the blitz to being good against the blitz, which apparently just by changing teams, Daniel Jones has been able to accomplish? How does that happen?
Yeah, you get a lot of help. We just talked about it. Like innovative quarterback-centric minds that can help quarterbacks deal with. One thing about Daniel, he's an incredible athlete, super smart, and I think when he got into the league, he thought he could do it all. I could be Superman. And he tried to be Superman, and it just ran into the ground. And then Brian Dable showed up and simplified things, and it got better. And it really forced Daniel to say, look, I know you're super smart. I know you can take on all kinds of data, but sometimes there's guys that can sit in the classroom and are the smartest people alive, but out on the field with the adrenaline and the speed of the game and everything that happens, their mind doesn't hold up. It just can't handle all the data. And so it feels like what the Colts have done is they're running the football, right? Top 5 in the league. And when they blitz, I've got the threat of running the football at them, even in the blitz situation. And it just kind of slows everything down and it simplifies things. If you want a quarterback to deal with the blitz, have their mind be at peace rather than racing.
That's Steve Young yesterday on PTI, State of Quarterbacking. He's really, really insightful. Don't know why it's not working with some network now, but he goes on with friends. So he's on with Dan Patrick frequently and Tony and Mike on PTI. One more from the NFL. A lot of talk you've been hearing last couple of weeks. Tom Brady, conflict of interest. He has access to these meetings, production meetings with coaches for games that he's going to broadcast. And there he was in the Raiders coaching booth a couple of Monday nights ago with a headset on. And that has really ramped up this, hey, you know, this is not right. He has access that other owners don't have. It's no problem for him to be up in the coach's booth, but then he's getting inside information at these meetings. So he cracked back yesterday with his newsletter, and here's some of what he wrote. He said, I love football. At its core, it's a game of principles, and with all the successes it has given me, I have a moral and ethical duty to the sport, which is why the point where my roles in it intersect, it is not actually a point of conflict, despite what paranoid and distrustful might believe. Rather, it's the place from which my ethical duty emerges to grow, evolve, and improve the game that has given me everything. That's kind of interesting for a guy who was suspended for 4 games for Deflategate by the NFL, and also was coached by a coach who was clearly, you know, stretching the rules, if not breaking them, with Spygate. So those are kind of interesting words that he puts there, paranoid and distrustful. Everybody in the NFL is paranoid and distrustful, of course. More from Brady in the newsletter. When you live through uncertain and untrusting times like we are today, it is very easy to watch a person's passions and profession intersect and to believe you're looking at some sort of a dilemma. Because when you're blindsided by distrust, it's hard to see anything than self-interest. People who are like that, particularly to a chronic pathological degree, are telling on themselves. They're showing you their worldwide view and how they operate. They're admitting that they can only conceive of interests that are selfish, and they cannot imagine a person doing their job for reasons that are greater than themselves. These kind of people make horrible teammates, by the way. All this over broadcasting some football games, he says, yeah, it is a conflict of interest. They'll let them get away with it, and maybe nobody's going to mind, but you watch. If the Raiders get really good, just like the tush push with the Eagles, defending champions, people are worked up about the fact that they have an unfair advantage. You watch. The Raiders start to get good, start to be in contention for Super Bowls. People are going to point to this, and maybe the heat gets turned up on Brady, or maybe he's Teflon Tom, and it won't stick to him. We'll see. All right, I don't know if we'll get updates today on the Terry McLaurin situation. One report today from Ian Rappaport says hip flexor. There are other reports circulating out there that it's a sports hernia. They initially called it a quad injury. We'll have to see. And I would imagine we'll have Jayden Daniels back on the practice field today, whether he goes full or not. Will be interesting to see. Also, we'll hear from Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, on what the expectations are. I think he's going to play it close to the vest because they want to keep Atlanta guessing as to whether it's going to be Daniels or Mariota on Sunday. But we shall see. Again, Bram coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning on a Friday, 9 a.m.